Okay, so session 2. Assuming everyone has it, or anybody who wants to have it available has it available for reading along as we go. Session 2 took place on January 20th, 1981. Is there anybody who would like to start our reading off with 2.0?
I can start.
Great.
Okay. I'm Ra. I greet you in the love and the light of our infinite creator. I'm with this mind-body-spirit complex, which has offered itself for a channel. I communicate with you. Queries are in order in your projections of mind distortion at this time-space. Thusly, I would assure this group that my own social memory complex has one particular method of communicating with those few who may be able to harmonize their distortions with ours, and that is to respond to queries for information. We are comfortable with this format. May the queries now begin. Questioner. I'm guessing that there are enough people who would understand what you are saying, interested enough for us to make a book of communications with it, and I wondered if you would agree to this, us making a book. And if so, I was thinking that possibly a bit of historical background on yourself would be in order. Inaudible question. I am Ra. The possibility of communication, as you would call it, from the one to the one through distortions acceptable for meaning is the reason we contacted this group. There are few who will grasp, without significant distortion, that which we communicate through this connection with this mind-body-spirit complex. However, if it be your desire to share our communications with others, we have the distortion towards a perception that this would be most helpful in regularizing and crystallizing your own patterns of vibration upon the levels of experience which you call the life. If one is illuminated, are not all illuminated? Therefore, we are oriented towards speaking for you in whatever supply of speakingness you may desire. To teach, learn is the law of one in one of its most elementary distortions. Questioner, could you tell us something about your historical background, your earlier times in the illusion and the time state contact, possibly your incarnation on this planet that you spoke of before, and contact with earlier races on this planet? Then we would have something to start with in writing this book. I am Ra. We are aware that your mind-body is calculating the proper method of performing the task of creating a teach-learning instrument. We are aware that you find our incarnate, as you call it, state of interest. We waited for a second query so as to emphasize that the time-space of several thousand of your years creates a spurious type of interest. Thus, in giving this information, we ask the proper lack of stress be placed upon our experiences in your local space-time. The teach learning, which is our responsibility, is philosophical rather than historical. We shall now proceed with your request, which is harmless if properly evaluated. We are those of the Confederation who 11,000 of your years ago came to two of your planetary cultures, which were at the time closely in touch with the creation of the one creator. It was our naive belief that we could teach, learn by direct contact, and the free will distortions of individual feeling or personality were in no danger, we thought, of being disturbed, as these cultures were already closely aligned with an all-embracing belief in the liveness or consciousness of all. We came and were welcomed by the peoples whom we wished to serve. We attempted to aid them in technical ways having to do with the healing of the mind-body-spirit complex distortions through the use of the crystal, appropriate to the distortion, placed within a certain appropriate series of ratios of time-space material. Thus, the pyramids were created. We found that the technology was reserved largely for those with the effectual mind-body distortion of power. This was not intended by the law of one. We left your peoples. The group that was to work with those in the area of South America, as you call that portion of your sphere, gave up not so easily. They returned, we did not. However, we have never left your vibration due to our responsibility for the changes in consciousness that had first caused and then found distorted in ways not relegated to the law of one. We attempted to contact the rulers of the land to which we had come, that land which you call Egypt, and in some areas, the Holy Land. In the 18th dynasty, as it is known to your records of space-time distortions, we were able to contact a pharaoh, as you would call him. The man was small in life experience on your own plane and was what this instrument would call wanderer. Thus, this mind-body-spirit complex received our communication distortions and was able to blend his distortions with our own. This young entity had been given a vibratory complex of sound which vibrated in honor of a prosperous god, as this mind-body complex, which we call instrument for convenience, would call Amun. The entity decided that this name, being in honor of one among many gods, was not acceptable for inclusion in his vibratory sound complex. Thus, he changed his name to one which honored the sun disk. This distortion, called Aten, was a close distortion to our reality as we understand our own nature of mind-body-spirit complex distortion. However, it does not come totally into alignment with the intended disk. This distortion, called Aten, does not come totally into alignment with the intended teach learning which was sent. This entity, Akhenaten, became convinced that the vibration of one was the true spiritual vibration and thus decreed the law of one. However, this entity's beliefs were accepted by very few. His priests gave lip service only, without the spiritual distortion towards seeking. The peoples continued in their beliefs. When this entity was no longer in this density, again the polarized beliefs and the many gods came into their own and continued so until one known as Muhammad delivered the peoples into a more intelligible distortion of mind-body-spirit relationships. Do you have a more detailed interest at this time?
That's great. Thanks, Sean. Yeah, so we'll just pause there and see of all that what stood out to folks.
Was Muhammad before or after Abraham?
I'm pretty sure that Abraham came first.
I think so too.
Yeah. Although I don't know the timeline of those figures. Does anyone know?
This is going to be a very basic question, like based on my very limited knowledge of any of the religious stuff. Was Muhammad the one who channeled the Quran, or like what did he do? I'm sorry, that's such a basic question that I just don't know at all.
Muhammad is the founder of Islam and is who they call the prophet. I'm not very knowledgeable about his role or what he did either, but yeah.
Yuri just posted something in the chat about Muhammad. Yuri posted in the chat.
600 years after Jesus. Yeah, Abraham is known, as far as I understand, Abraham is known as sort of the, I don't even want to say the official, but the person who brought in monotheism, the person who sort of declared a unified creator. Now, of course, that was after Akhenaten. You know, Akhenaten was kind of, I guess, maybe historically before Abraham, but it didn't stick in Akhenaten's time. The idea of a unified creator didn't stick. It's a very short-lived period of Egyptian history.
I have a comment, which is like the dates. I've always tried to like match the dates that Ra says with like dates that I look up, and they never match. So he says 11,000 years ago. I don't think it's in this session, but he talks about the first pyramid that he built using thought. I think that was Imhotep, the King Dojer's pyramid. It wasn't the Great Pyramid of Giza. It was a different pyramid. Because there's a session where he said like we built the first pyramid to like line up with like some great architect, and that architect I think is Imhotep, and that first pyramid was built in like 3000 BC, which is about 5,000 years ago. it's just always been like curious to me how like
Yeah.
maybe like his, I don't know if it's like just our dates are wrong or like Ra's perception of time is just, he's mentioned that he has difficulty with our time measurements, or maybe there's another different pyramid that he's talking about.
Yeah.
But Chang, hasn't it been proven that the pyramids are much older? Like the current scholastic time dating is incorrect. The pyramids are way older than 3,000 to 4,000 years old. It's just part of the disinformation I think that we're getting from academia.
Yeah, this is a big, it's actually on, it's kind of a little bit more front of mind on the collective consciousness, I think, after Graham Hancock's documentary came out on Netflix just a few months ago, called Ancient Apocalypse. Of course, Graham Hancock, if any of you know, is an author who's been sort of questioning the official historical timeline of Earth and early civilizations. And is a bit of a, iconoclast, and, not a lot of, traditional scholars are not very interested in his theories. But the Netflix series did really well. And so a lot of people are getting turned on to the notion that perhaps the timeline that, that we learned in school of how early the civilizations that we know of is sort of like, ancient civilizations on Earth were supposed to have been placed in the historical timeline, versus the evidence shows that there's a lot of possibility that in fact human civilizations go back much earlier than what the official narrative says. So anyway, this whole question of timelines and how old things are is certainly very it's a hotly disputed topic, and I think it's freshly up in the collective mind of humanity because of this Netflix documentary. Like, I think it was #1 in documentaries for a while, and it stirred up a lot of really interesting conversations. On LL Research's website, they have a timeline. They've kind of like taken all the dates out of the whole Ra contact and put them all in order. And according to that resource, it says that
You share screen.
Share screen?
Yeah.
Sure. I will do both. I will first put a link here, and then I will also share screen. I hope this works. Oh, geez. No, I don't know what just happened. Can you guys see? I can't.
Yeah, we see your screen.
That's funny. Okay. Yeah, so 8,500 years ago. Wait, sorry. We're going ahead in the reading a little bit, but I'll just cover it since it's here. So 11,000 years ago is when Ra landed. Oh, y'all, this is not working very well. My whole screen is glitching out. I can't see anything. Can you all see that? Is it helpful for me to be sharing the screen?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, great. So yeah, Ra landed 11,000 years ago. And then Ra left during that time period. It didn't go well, as we'll read in a second. And then 8,500 years ago, so 2,500 years later, Ra returned and began the work of designing the pyramid, the first pyramid. And it took a while to form the thought form that created the first pyramid that they built. And then it says that the first pyramid here, it says the first pyramid to be built is the Great Pyramid, which is what I understood Ra said too. Great Pyramid, which is the largest of the three in Giza, was built by Ra. And then the others were built by Ra over the next 1,500 years. And again, this is according to the numbers given by Ra, which they do say, as Shang said, they do say they have a hard time with numbers. So they may need to be taken with a grain of salt. And 1350 BC is when Akhenaten was in power, and is when they made contact with Akhenaten, and Akhenaten decreed the law of one. And then there's some other things that have to do with the timeline, but those are the big dates, the major dates.
I'll just,
So helpful.
oh, sorry.
You want to go first, Rachel, and then?
I was just saying it's so helpful. I'm done. Go, Rachel.
Oh, I was just going to add, and Aaron, you might have said it and I just missed it while you were talking about Graham Hancock, but his theory specifically suggests that the Great Pyramid is 11,000 years old. So that lines up with what Ross says.
Mhm.
It also lines up with the theory. It's not coming to me right now, but it's one of my favorite theories. If I remember, I'll put it in the chat, but it's basically the theory of the Great Deluge that all the ancient cultures talk about, that is it's not suspected. I mean, we know that there was a huge flood around 11,000 years ago. And then with Laura Atwood's work, theorizing that wise spiritual people went around the world and tried to rebuild society, it likely would have been right after the flood. And so it would also be around that time of 11,000 years ago. So I just wanted to add those little various tidbits in, because they do align if we give alternative theories credence, and I think all of us do. If I had to make an assessment, at least, using discernment, of course. But yeah, that's it.
I know there's at least some people who've come to the law of one, maybe a couple that I can think of, who actually learned about it after kind of having their mind blown by reading Graham Hancock's work. Because it's just like, it's off the beaten path of what we tend to, learn, or what, what sort of the mainstream narrative of history is. So I'll share in the Telegram thread, I'll share the link to the Ancient Apocalypse documentary if anyone wants to check that out. I think it's pretty cool.
I have a quick question about what was mentioned about the work that was done in South America. Would you know which areas of South America specifically, or is it just South America in general? Just curious to know if it relates to the Mayan ruins that are also, I feel are activated structures for the planet.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a lot of mystery that surrounds it, but Ra does say specifically that that the other group that came, the other Confederation group that came with them and worked with the South Americans, the remnants of that working, Ra called the so-called lost cities. So there's a lot of, as far as I know, there's a lot of sites that kind of fall under that grouping of the lost cities. But I think that the key clue is the pyramids. The Ra's group, and then the two other groups that came with Ra, all three of them were pyramid builders. They all three knew about and understood the technology of pyramids as places for healing and initiation. And there's also been some really interesting work done. I don't have any references I could share easily, but I know I've seen people who've studied ancient civilizations take images from the architecture of Egypt and the architecture of some of the lost cities. I think it probably was the Incan civilizations and others too, and then compared them, side by side. And these are civilizations that are very, very far away from each other, and the features are striking, of the architecture. Right. So I think when we're looking at which cultures in South America. I actually think it's Central and South America. The cities that had pyramids, those ancient pyramids, I think those are all somehow connected to that working with the other Confederation member, is my sense of it.
Okay, cool. And sorry, one last question is, I saw on your timeline that it was saying about Atlantis. I'm just curious if you would know where Lemuria would fit in that kind of like timeline, if it would be kind of like lumped in together with Atlantis, or if it would be separate.
It's a great question. They do talk about Mu and Lemuria later, and it's an earlier civilization than Atlantis. Lemuria, I think, was a Pacific Ocean based, like probably Hawaii is my guess, somewhere connected to Hawaii or around there. And Atlantis is, I believe, in the Atlantic Ocean, or was in the Atlantic Ocean.
Awesome, thank you.
And we'll get more into that later. They talk a fair amount actually about those ancient cultures that are earlier than the time we're talking about right now.
Awesome, thank you, Aaron.
Totally. Okay, so Nia and then BJ. Where did Nia go?
You're muted, Nia.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm not used to Zoom yet. Actually, Diana had her hand raised before me, so I want to give her the floor and then I can go next.
I don't know if I did, but thank you. A little off topic, I'm just curious. I don't think anybody over at LNL Research that I don't think is aware of where Carla would have gotten the term wanderers. And Ra says that they're basically using her term. Is anyone aware of a text or material? I mean, I know for Dolores Cannon that was akin to the volunteers, I think, but anybody have exposure to that term?
I've heard it one other time in a working that was older than the Law of One, but I don't remember where that was.
It's interesting. Thanks.
It's a good question. I had that same question before. I wish I would have made a note of it. Nia, do you want to say what you wanted to say now?
Yeah, it's prior to the second part. Something that really piqued my interest. He goes back to, this is 2.1 in the last paragraph, says, most helpful in regularizing and crystallizing your own patterns of vibration upon the levels of experience you call the life. If one is illuminated, are not all illuminated? That I want to know more about that. I want to know what they meant by that. I do understand the oneness obviously is the main point here. However, our distortion of separateness, if one is illuminated, are not all illuminated. So I was hoping anybody else could speak to that for further understanding.
Yeah, it's a great question. Does anyone want to respond?
That was what I wanted to talk about too. Also, Rachel said that she wanted to hear about your visit to Lemuria.
Oh, okay. Did they hear us talking?
No, I
No.
posted it. That you visited Lemuria and your near-death experience.
Okay.
Yeah, I really appreciate that piece from Ra about sharing the material and what would be helpful, and specifically about like the historical, like don't get lost in the historical pieces, that it's transient information, and Ra doesn't say that in this chunk, but they say in other places. And part of the way that I take that is like the piece about if one is illuminated, are not all illuminated, is when one, like if I imagine myself in an awakening experience or an enlightened experience of seeing oneness, then I see that you and I are one. And I see that your consciousness is the same as my consciousness, and consciousness is illumination. Like, you know, it's like the light of awareness is how awareness works. It's luminous. And so it's like from my perspective, I think what they're pointing to is like you can't help everyone. As soon as you try to help everyone, you've left yourself. Like you have to illuminate, and then gosh, the words aren't coming very well. Illuminate your own consciousness, like return to the seat of your own consciousness and support another person to return to the seat of their consciousness. And that is that's how it works for everyone. Like if we try to disperse it too much or try to spread out, it doesn't, we're lost. Yeah, I don't think I spoke very well, but yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things that stood out to me about that paragraph is it's very clear that Ra did not make contact with LL Group in order to have, like, it wasn't Ra's agenda to have a book, right? It wasn't Ra's agenda to, like, for this information to go anywhere beyond just them. Like, Ra was perfectly content with that communication staying just between that group, the LL Group. You know, that was enough. And they, you know, they sort of say that in lots of different ways. You know, forget ye the counting, and then here is, you know, to teach one is to teach all, or if one is illuminated, are not all illuminated. And one of the ways that I take that is later in the teachings, Ra talks about how everyone on earth shares a mind, like shares a portion of the cosmic mind. It's a smaller portion of the cosmic mind, but the planetary mind is a shared resource that we literally all access. We all have access to it. And it's deep in the subconscious. It's deeper than what we think of as our personal mind. But it's there, and it's a shared resource. And so if one is successful in teaching another the law of one, then that one that was taught has taken that information deeply into themselves, and it puts an imprint into the planetary mind. So to teach one person is to teach the whole planet, in a way, in that sense. And I think that might be at least partially what they're talking about. Diana?
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, part of the question was about the line that said that where Ra basically says, if you want to share what, you know, our communications with others, we think that this would be most helpful in, and then they say regularizing and crystallizing your own patterns of vibration upon the levels of experience which you call the life. That's the part I was thinking about a little bit, because I suppose the meaning of that, I suppose, depends on what Ra means by your patterns of vibration. But I think that just in short, I think they're just basically saying, if you want to make a book about this, what we share with you, we do think that would be helpful in helping you folks to undistort that which is distorted in your third density experience, to straighten out your approach to this thing you call life, to regularize, right, like a crystal, to make it more reliable, more dependable for transmitting light, more accurate and regular in its ability to consistently and stably and clearly transmit this intelligent light. That's my take on that.
Carolyn.
Hi, yeah. I just had a thought or a inkling that when one is enlightened, then they see others with the potential of being enlightened, or they're on a level of seeing enlightenment. So that potential goes into the field, if you know what I mean. And it seeds the it helps potentiate the illumination of all. When one is seeing from that level of, non-separation and love and potential, there it goes into the field.
I have a comment to make. Hi, everybody. So in the first session, I was reading it before I got on, and they were talking about not being able to distinguish our one self from another self from their vantage point. And so when I read that, I could just kind of took it as that because everything's all one and all connected, that the illumination of one like automatically affects everything else, which is just, just all the same, just harder to see it in this density.
That's right. That's a good point. Nia, was that conversation helpful? Was that discussion helpful? Cool. Diana, your comment was really helpful for me too, because I think when I've read the part where they say it would be most helpful in regularizing and crystallizing your own patterns of vibration, I think I've taken that to mean it would be good for you guys to do that. Like it would be good for you to take on the work of trying to share this with others. Meaning the LL group. But when I read that again through the way that I heard you comment on it, and it really does land for me. They're like, oh no, they're talking about the planet. They're talking about, it'd be great if there was a law of one book. And I just want to give like massive props to LL for their mission to make this available. Like the way that they've done this work, first of all, getting this work done, getting the raw contact done, but then the way that they've held it the world like for free and just like supporting, like so selflessly supporting others. I just love them so much. I just want to give them so many props. And I mean, geez, by at this point, what is it? 40? Are we 40 years later or something like that? I can't quite remember. Yeah, ish 40 years later. How many people have been whose lives have been touched by the fact that this material is now available on Earth? So yeah, so from that perspective, I think the Earth itself, the whole planetary collective, has been aided. It has been most helpful for sure.
It's so hard for me to like conceptualize that that the same benefit could have been attained by them just only transmitting it to them, because I feel like I've benefited so much, and I'm like, thank you for like not holding this information. But it seems like Ra, definitely views it in a different way. It's just so hard to conceptualize like that could have reached me in like the same amount of way if it was just kept closed like that, like within a closed group. I just can't. It's wild.
Well, to speak on that, they are higher sixth density, 6.5 million originally separate incarnate entities that are now an entire spirit mind complex. So they're already there, and they're like, it's kind of reverse engineering backwards to remember the 3D density of learning and distortion of separation. And, it's trying to bring us up to the oneness factor. And it's got to be tough to remember how our rational brain minds get attached to historical time, space, time. And so I know many of us, you know, we just, our eyes pop up, we're like, a historical reference, we can put a timeline on this. And, you know, and they even have the timeline on, like he just showed us on the LL research site, because that's our 3D brain minds get really fixated on that, and we get really stuck sometimes with that. And so that one was a hard one for me to like close down the analytical part, just kind of move that aside and move forward through that to get to the, oh yeah, we're talking, you know, upper sixth density being, and that there's a quantum jump for me in, I have a saying that I've had for a couple of years, getting out of my own way with spiritual awakening and everything, because, and that's an example of that, where initially there's that peak interest of, ooh, a historical reference. Where do I put that in my analytical, logical, rational brain mind? You know, and then I have to get out of my own way and allow the rest to come forward with that feeling of, you know, letting that part go and being okay with that. That one was a huge leap for me. And I'm still working on that. It'll always be there. And then I catch myself. I'm like, okay, this is, I can put that to the side. I can let that go. And I have to keep releasing the 3D density brain mind that keeps popping back in with all these helpful and non-helpful references to chime in with.
Totally. And you are so not alone in that. I mean, I certainly love the the details. My mind loves the details and the history and all that stuff too. And that's my experience in study groups, is that like we are very interested in all the details and the drama and the the transient bits. And Ra is so steady with their like clarity about what they're here to teach, and I appreciate that too. Okay, so Shang has his hand raised, and then BJ and Spirit Song.
Have you guys heard of like there's like some story about like monkeys on islands washing coconuts or something, and like
Yep.
so the story is like there's like all these monkeys on different islands, and like some monkeys learn to wash their coconuts or something before they eat them, and like once there's some critical mass, suddenly all the monkeys on all the islands suddenly start washing the coconuts. I don't know where that story came from. I'm not sure if that's, I don't think that was an actual study, but Ross, is this what Ra is implying? That like when you go into like you teach one that goes all something about like if enough people reach enlightenment, then spontaneously it makes it easier for the average person to reach enlightenment? Is that sort of what he's getting at?
I think that's a great example. What I understand is that's called the 100th monkey effect. And I actually do think it was a study that was done. I mean, I read a little about it a long time ago. It comes up a lot. I've heard people reference that phenomena a lot, the 100th monkey effect. And from my perspective, that's a really great metaphor for what Ross talking about. It points to, I mean, if that is a true phenomenon, which I kind of imagine that it is, but if it is a true phenomenon, it points to the interconnectedness of you know, certainly those monkeys that had that experience. But then there's this kind of deeper pattern that we can understand there, which Rod does talk about, where the mind is fractal. There's like, you know, there's all this, there's different levels of connectedness. So just like I was saying earlier, everybody on the planet Earth has a shared resource of the planetary mind. But then Ra says that there's racial mind, there's racial minds. So subsets of races on Earth have a shared mind. And those shared minds are not, you know, are not the same. And so like, you know, one species of monkey has some sort of shared beingness. And that's why that phenomenon is able to exist. And that wouldn't necessarily, I think if those monkeys lived in proximity to maybe some other species of monkey, I don't imagine necessarily that second species of monkey would automatically get that information. Like, who knows? Like, here we are. I mean, this is a lot of speculation, but I'm just trying to point to the fact that there are these branches within the cosmic mind. And I think that's a really interesting and powerful and fascinating thing to contemplate. Anyway, what do y'all think? Any other comments on that?
I was just putting in the chat that what I've heard that related to the morphogenetic field or morphogenic field, which where I've most directly experienced that is in constellations work. And I know Steph does constellations work. So I bet Steph could tell us about that in constellations work, which is like a way of tapping into the field of knowing that is beyond our conscious mind, and allowing our subconscious or unconscious to be informed by a greater knowing. And yeah, Steph also put in the chat that wild transformative stories have come through constellation work. So I would love to hear anything from Steph too about that. And also Spirit Song is still on stack to say something else.
Steph, did you have any comments to make? BJ was, I think, inviting you to say anything about that from your perspective if you want to.
Oh, I wasn't sure if Diana wanted to say something or if Spirit Song wanted to say something first before.
I was wondering if Spirit Song knew that she was muted, and I don't know if anything was shared or if you guys were just chatting.
So she was saying, y'all go ahead because she didn't want to interrupt the flow.
Okay,
I don't want to interrupt the flow either. Steph, would you please share?
Sure, yeah. So yeah, it's just like really beautiful work through family constellations. So for those of you that don't know what it is, we get together as a group and we start to represent different aspects of the person's lineage or aspects of themselves. And sometimes we also go into past life situations that are appearing in this lifetime, like just like the imprint that still remains after someone reincarnates life over life, and that are still appearing in this lifetime. So I think, yeah, the most profound one that I found so far, because there are many, is there was one time where I had a dream about a few friends of mine, and I had reached out to them feeling really sick. I was just like, I had a dream about you. Do you want me to come over? Like, I don't know what's going on, but I just had a dream about you and I just know I have to come to your space. And the day before that, I was having a lot of pain in my womb space and a lot of pain in my chest. And I wasn't sure where it was coming from. And when I drove over to their place, I found out that my friend was in the middle of having a miscarriage, that she was like the baby was passing through from one realm to the other. And that was wild that I was able to feel that from, we're quite far away from each other. But, like that just kind of shows you how connected, we all are. And after we did that retreat, after we processed some of that work, I ended up retrieving 11 lost babies from the ground, from the land that they were on. But the land that they were on was a representation of the mother's ties to Mexico because she's from Mexico. So when I was doing the retrieval from the land, the babies that actually came out of the land were from Mexico, but they were traveling with the baby that was currently passing through. I hope this is making sense. I sound kind of crazy. But that was like really beautiful. And then the day after that, I went to a dinner and I had like a long night. I got home at like 2 a.m. I had to get a few burgers on the way to ground myself back to like what had just happened. And it's really interesting because very similar to the material of today where Ra's describing to have these different altar items in the space where we were doing the retrieval for the babies and we were sending them to the light. I was guided to set up like water angels because it was going to be a big thing that was going to happen. So it's interesting that Ra was also guiding to, I don't know, like readjust the channel from today's reading. But anyway, the next day I went to dinner and I almost canceled the dinner. But when I got there, I was telling the ladies that I had just met, I was like, I'm just so exhausted. I was just working with someone last night who had a miscarriage. And then the girl that I was having dinner with, she almost fell off her chair. And she was like, what do you mean you were helping someone that was having a miscarriage? I was doing that too. And I got home at 2 a.m. and I was like, wait a second. Wait a second. It's not the same person, is it? So we just like checked the location and we were like in 2 different areas. But that was wild because then we got together and we were able to help someone else that was going through a miscarriage at the same time. So it's kind of like the monkey story in a way, but in human form. Very profound. Yeah, so that's what I would share about that. I don't know if that's helpful, but yeah, thank you for listening to.
Thank you.
Well, yeah.
Thanks, Steph. Okay, so does anyone else want to follow up on that thread, or are we ready to move on to the stack, back to the stack, which is what Spirit's on, and then I think Diana, we're on stack. Let's go for what Spirit's on. What did it say?
Well, wow, what I mean, the story about the near-death experience in Lemuria is one thing, but something else that came up, sparked by what someone said. But now hearing all this beautiful esoteric stuff, I'm almost nervous to share it, but I will, just because it came up and maybe it means something to someone. When I was in a meditation group, and this was a long time, I'm sorry, being 74, I have lots of stories to share, but this was before the near-death experience that I spoke to you about. I was in a meditation group and I just asked, because we were told going into the meditation to seek what our soul looked like, or to be open to what our soul looks like. So I innocently said, thinking that I was going to get some beautiful esoteric stuff, show me what my soul looks like. And then I close my eyes, and then I'm catapulted into, however long we were there, it was a long, long time. It felt like a long time anyway. I was a beautiful baby, and then I was the beautiful baby's vomit. And then I was the ground the vomit was going into. And then I was like all these different parts of life, a beautiful child, and then a sick man that was molesting the child. And okay, I'm looking at my soul. I know we're one, we're all a part of everything, but I like to think about the roses and the beautiful scene I'm looking at with the pond. I don't like thinking about being a part of some of this other stuff. You know, I was a part of a cement staircase and all kinds of things that I don't think about when I think of oneness, but I just wanted to share that. And then the near-death experience, I wish I could say when I was in Lemuria, there is something that I can bring back. I didn't even know at the time. I wasn't involved, I don't think, maybe I was with raw material, but didn't know. I missed the first part, didn't know history or anything like that. And I didn't know much about Lemuria and Atlantis, and have since discovered that I was probably there in both times. But I was having some physical challenge before Benjamin and I left. We were trading houses with someone for a month who was in Honolulu. And I got really sick before we left. I'd had a UTI and I cleared it up, and then I was having high fevers. And it was now the night before we were to leave. And I said, Benjamin, we've got to find out what this is before we can go flying across the ocean. So the young doctor that saw me, now I've been a frequent flyer at Mission, and I've had a lot of really phenomenally wonderful medical people take care of me. But this young man was bent on his philosophies. And there is one in the medical community that if you're female, fat, fair, and over 40, you have gallbladder problems. So I was telling him my symptoms and pain on the right side and all these things. And he said, well, I'm going to have some images taken. And so I was sent up, and the young woman doing the, what is it when it's like if you're going to have a baby, ultrasound. And she was saying, you know, because they're not supposed to tell you anything. She was moving all around here and looking at my liver and saying, oh, I like starting out. And this was a while back. It's not quite so pretty now, but looking at a beautiful liver, you know, and so she's going on quietly then. And I said, and what can you tell me about what you see with my gallbladder? And she said, oh, well, we're not supposed to say anything, but let's say, you know, what she told me was there was nothing serious going on there at all. So we go back to the ER, and the doctor said, well, I was right. You've got a serious gallbladder problem, and I'm going to give you this prescription to go see my friend who will take your gallbladder out. We went back home, got on a plane. We're flying across the ocean to Honolulu, and I've got these outrageous high temperatures, and I'm telling people, I'm not sick. I'm not going to make you sick, because I was shaking and everything. But I just have, oh, and he told me, and because you tried to do something about your UTI with natural means, now you have kidney infection. I have a kidney infection. I won't infect anybody. And I had antibiotics. So we get to Honolulu, and this has gotten worse and worse. And I said, Benjamin, we've got to get help. Went to the hospital and found they had misdiagnosed me at Mission. This was not a mistake. I was supposed to be in Honolulu and in a state of unconsciousness so that I could go down under the ocean. But I had a little tiny stone that was caught in one of the two sides going to, anyway, it was a little tiny stone that, because it was not detected in that ER visit, now I had sepsis. And the doctors said, if you hadn't gotten here when you did, you was most definitely have died. And so for 3 days, I was in another state. And anytime I would wake up and Benjamin would be there, I would say, I'm doing something under the ocean. I'm doing something under the ocean. And I didn't know what I was doing, but I just knew each time as I came back, I was doing something under the ocean. Well, then, because what frustrates me about these kinds of experiences, I think I should remember everything. You know, I want to have a bunch of stuff to tell. Okay, but no memories, just that I was doing something under the ocean. Then I found out Lemuria was in that area, and you know, somebody was able to tell me that. Then, oh, okay, that makes sense. I left something undone, or things are still being done there, or something. And so it was a phenomenal experience. I had a similar one I won't go into, when I was at the ocean in Sarasota, and was seeing ships coming across all the time, and then under that ocean where Atlantis was. Now, why I can't remember, it's like I'm told that I'm most closely aligned with the angelic kingdom. Well, why can't I remember everything about wherever we are when we're not in body form? I mean, my children think that I'm an angel in human form. My kids are supposed to have problems with me, but that's what they think who I am. So there must be something to it. And what I don't understand is why I don't have crystallized memories of, okay, I went down under the ocean. If I was at Lemuria, why don't I remember a lot of details so I can wow you with that? But anyway, that's what I have to share. And I want to go back to the really sweet esoteric stuff. And I've had that experience of oneness with others in a loving way, doing healing work too. And I like that better than just being able to say, oh, well, I've been doing something down under the ocean in Lemuria, but can't tell you anything about what it was. I can't give you any stories about Lemuria, but that's what happened. It's there. Yeah. When you're 74, you'll have some more stories to tell like that, besides those beautiful stories about helping, which are phenomenal, helping the little ones back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a great mystery, Spirit Song. Why it would be that, that you don't have the memory, but there must be some, must be some reason why you don't. It's working on some other level that doesn't require your memory, maybe.
Right. And when I do my healing work with people, when I take them into what I call the inner journey, and I am speaking in light language, I've said to Spirit before, if it's better for me to speak in language that they understand, I would love to do that. And I would like to understand. Part of me wants to know, what am I saying? And what I was told was, you're not really saying anything that you would understand in a language. You are giving a transmission of energy on the wings of light and sound. And it goes in and does what it needs to do and changes DNA when it needs to, erases things that aren't helpful, helps with the healing of that being. But no, you don't need to know what that is. Well, the inquiring mind wants to know, but I have to be willing to just say, okay, and what was the meaning of my soul looking like the cement and all that? I have to try to grok that myself, or say, let it go to the side and say, it just is. I'm never going to understand it all. It just is. Right?
That's right. Well, in addition to the fact that Ra teaches us that third density, they say, is not the density of understanding. The law of confusion is what makes the universe. The law of free will, the law of confusion, is another way of saying the law of free will. Anyway, and it's there's great purpose sometimes in not understanding, and this whole density seems to be about that. So
yeah,
it's our struggle to be comfortable in that condition.
Beautiful things happen when I do a healing session, and I haven't understood anything that has been coming out of my mouth, but miracles happen, and that's all that matters.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Spirit Song.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to kick us back into gear with the reading, because I do think we can finish the reading today.
And
if we
has her hand raised too.
Oh, sorry, I missed that. Go ahead.
Sorry, just really quickly, I just wanted to also tag on to Spirit Song's share that last night I had a satsang with a group called we're studying Ramdas, and we just wanted to get together, and we were all trying to stay in the field in silence. There was not a lot of talking, and we were trying to move into a place of loving awareness beyond words. And in that space, I found myself not being the space holder, but everyone was holding the space by just being themselves and embodying that is what is beyond words. And at the end of the night, everyone was so in love with each other, even though we didn't have deep conversations per se. The connection was just out. Yeah, it was so beautiful. Everyone was so in love with each other that when they left, a few people forgot their stuff here because they were all so in love with one another. It was just really beautiful to see. So sometimes it's beyond words. So yeah, I just wanted to say that. Letting me share.
Beautiful. Oh my gosh, I love Ram Dass so much. He's such a sweet teacher. Okay, so we're going to pick up where we left off at question 2.3. I'll read this one. Questioner, we are very interested in the entire story that you have to tell and in getting into Law of One in quite some detail. There will be several questions that I'll ask as we go along that may or may not be related directly to understanding the Law of One. However, I believe that the proper way of presenting this as a teach learning vehicle to the population of the planet that will read it at this time is to investigate different facets of what you tell us. You spoke of crystal healing. One other thing I might mention is that when the instrument becomes fatigued, we want to cut off communication and resume it at a later time after the instrument is recharged. And if the instrument is suitable at this time, I would like a little discussion of the crystal healing that you mentioned. Ra. I am Ra. The principle of crystal healing is based upon an understanding of the hierarchical nature of the structure of the illusion, which is the physical body, as you would call it. There are crystals which work upon the energies coming into the spiritual body. There are crystals which work upon the distortions from spirit to mind. There are crystals which balance the distortions between the mind and the body. All of these crystal healings are charged through purified channels. Without the relative crystallization of the healer working with the crystal will not be properly charged. The other ingredient is a proper alignment with the energy fields of the planet upon which you dwell, and the holistic or cosmic distortions or instreamings which enter the planetary aura in such a manner that an appropriate ratio of shapes and placement within these shapes is of indicated aid in the untangling or balancing process. To go through the various crystals to be used would be exhaustive to this instrument, although you may ask us, if you wish, in another session. The delicacy, shall we say, of the choosing of the crystal is very critical, and, in truth, a crystalline structure, such as a diamond or ruby, can be used by a purified channel who is filled with the love light of one in almost any application. This, of course, takes initiation, and there have never been many to persevere to the extent of progressing through the various distortion leavings which initiation causes. May we further inform you in any fairly brief way upon this or another subject? So I'll just pause there. Crystal healing. Diana?
I have curiosity around where Ra talks about the various crystals and how there are those which work upon the energies coming into the spiritual body. and then crystals which work upon the distortions from spirit to mind, and then distortions between mind and body, because this kind of indicates to me that this in-streaming light, right, the creator's light that streams into our being, enters first the spirit, which informs the mind, which informs the body. So how would we go about defining spirit in that light, if that hierarchy makes sense to others in the group?
Will you say it again? I didn't quite catch the gist of your question.
So Ross just talking about where crystals can be applied, and they start by saying that crystals can be applied to, they can work on the energies coming into the spiritual body. And then there are crystals that work on the energies between the spiritual body and the mind. And then there are crystals that work between the mind and the physical body, right? So to me, and this is my first question, does that indicate to you that the light, the creator's light, would be streaming first into the spiritual body, and then that light through the spiritual body would then sort of shape or inform the mental body, which would then flow into the physical body? Like Ra has said before, that the body is a creature of the mind. And it almost sounds here like they're saying, okay, the mind is a creature of the spirit as well. And there are crystals that deal with all of these connections. So if that seems true to any of you, and I'm totally open to other opinions on that, would you then say that, how would you then define the spirit, as Ra's talking about it here, the spiritual body that these crystals can work upon? It's a big question, but if anybody has thoughts, I'd love to hear them.
There is mention about this in other sections where they talk about the rarity of the like, not like the linkage, but like the connection, I think, between the spirit and the body. I believe and it's always been confusing to me, but while you were talking about it, one of the things that came to me, and I don't know if this is at all useful or related, like, to what they mean, but if they're talking about the in-streamings, I'm thinking about the spirit, intelligent infinity coming in through the mind to the third eye, and then maybe that being a gateway to the rest of the body.
Actually, something there is making sense to me, Kristen. And I want to apologize too, because like, I think I'm getting way ahead of us. I think that I've been looking at this material over and over, and I reach these spots where I have a question, but it's probably not time to talk about that. But Kristen, Ra also talks about like the indigo ray being the form maker body and things like that. So I think there are connections there that would make sense to me, but I probably should table that, because it really doesn't have anything to do with what Ra just is delivering to Dawn's new mind right now.
I think it's related. I think it's a good question, because it does definitely relate also to that other stuff where they talk about that later. And I feel like it's important, and really probably cool, but unfortunately they don't seem to delve like so much further into it in one passage that I've seen.
Well, then I will plant the seed that I'm excited about the notion that a crystal could influence the in-streaming energies into the spiritual body.
I encourage you always to ask your questions, no matter if you feel like they're, if they come up for you in the reading, then please ask them. And what I have found in our previous working through the material, it'll become a theme. As crystals come up and as the bodies come up, we'll get to build upon this question that you've now planted the seed of. So thank you for the question. Yuri, did you want to either respond or ask a different question?
I would like to respond. I'm not sure, but probably hierarchical structure of the illusion has to see with different rays or chakras, and our body has to see with yellow ray, and it means probably that there are some crystals which are better to work with different chakras. That's what I think. So for the higher chakras, there will be better different crystals.
And I also want to plug for anybody who's coming to the to the Secret of Light. I think we're going to get some pretty interesting insight into this question of the bodies, and yeah, I think there's some profound realizations that we're going to have when we study the Law of One and the Secret of Light together. I'm just so excited about it, because when Ra talks about the shapes and the geometries, they don't ever draw it. They don't ever we don't really know what shapes they're talking about, but Walter Russell does. And it's pretty exciting, because I think the shapes and geometries that Ra talks about here in this session, we're going to be able to see them and visualize them. And it's pretty cool. Okay, Nia.
So, a couple things. The note on geometries and such, and just a quick tidbit on the ancient civilizations aspect. The Gaia channel has a lot going on that plugs in a lot. It brings a lot of these separated pieces back together. I think ancient civilizations is one of them that gets into the details of the South American pyramids and how they're Matthias de Stefano talks about Atlantis and Mu and Lemuria and a lot of things, and they all have like a circle around the globe, and it gets into that big time. So another plug for Gaia channel and just exploring, because for me, that as similar to the Secret of Light, and that we're using Walter Russell's take on things, there are other sort of authorities that have a remembering that can plug in to these pieces. And Matthias de Stefano talks a lot about the flower of life and sacred geometry, and they have a visual in the show of it that for me as a visual learner, just super mega geek out onto. And I'm really looking forward to diving more into the secrets of light, and it's all juicy. So the other part of that was it talks about the initiate. So based on what you just said, Aaron, as these things come up to not, it's similar to Diana, I'm like, this comes up later, I should probably shelve this, but this will, I think, seed conversational branch that will continue, because they are spread out through the different sessions. Ra does not stick to one subject and exhaust that in order of sessions. And so it is, for me, I've had a hard time trying to, highlight in the book and then link back on, my web browser has like 10 tabs up from Law of One info that is this session to that session versus subject. And they talk about the white magic, and they talk about the altar and the sacred pieces and the northeast direction of 20 degrees. And I have gotten excited about it. I've also run into emotional roadblocks because I have associations with other authors and their takes on these things. And so I'm struggling with that. And I'm really excited to have a forum to geek out on that. But I also don't want to overtake the subject matter with my personal inquiries, because my personal inquiries run really deep with this, and they're very scattered and run all over the place. So this, I think, is his first mention of the initiate, and later on Ra talks about the adept, and they talk about the uses of white magic, and they talk about person. I just read it the other day, but it's, if you do law1.info and it looks up white magic, there's all the sessions listed and what Ra has to say about that. And the initiate and the adept having the mind like a scalpel as a tool to be able to work with these energies and to be able to keep negative entities at bay using the lesser, some banishment of the lesser pentagram. And those were huge. I mean, I could geek out for literal hours on these things. I really want to know other people's take on it. So if we continue that branch as that comes up further, this, I think, was this, to take Diana's word, the seed of that describing the initiate, and how he says here the diamond and the ruby for the initiate can be used as such and such. But again, it's really vaguely put. It's just like this tiny little snippet that opens up a whole world of tools for us 3D beings here, and workings that we could, would, and should be doing to help. So again, having only gotten through pieces and portions of that branch later, trying to bring that back to what he's saying here. I want to hear others' thoughts on initiate and the use of these crystalline tools for our benefit.
I am so with you in terms of your comment about, you know, how deep your questions go and how long we could talk about these things. The only thing I can offer right now is that, yes, certainly these themes do come up again. So we'll have more opportunities to, you know, to go deeper into these questions of all the things you mentioned, the initiation question and initiates, crystal healing, white magic, the things that come up. I've heard you talk about before, the things that come up for you in your association with the objects that are used, I think. Yeah, so we'll just do our best to cover what we can cover during the sessions. And I think starting this week, I'm gonna hold open office hours for anybody who wants to come and just geek out and talk about whatever questions you have. And I think that'll be on Thursday. So office hours with Professor Moo on Thursday. Y'all are welcome to just come and we could just talk about whatever anybody wants to talk about. And that'll help, I think, take off some of the pressure of what comes up during these sessions. It's always it's a fine balance for me to try to get us through the material, but also make enough space for people to, talk about the things that come up for them. We're not going to be able to finish reading tonight, as is, I think, apparent at this point. We're a little past halfway through, but we only have 10 minutes left. So, yeah, so I'll just request hive mind, collective self, other selves. Let's all continue to sit with the optimal way to move ourselves and move the group through this material. Let's try to read as much as we can, but also do the dance of make sure we make space for people's personal content. And it's always tricky. So let's just do that together. And I'm learning as we go too. So we won't be able to finish the reading tonight, but again, hopefully you can either, if you haven't already read it, you can read it and then either bring questions to the Telegram group. You can type them out. You can also just pull out your phone and just do a little video and say, hey guys, and this is what I'm thinking. I wanted to get your ideas on this, and let's just see if we can continue the discussion on the Telegram group. And then Thursday, I'll put this on the Telegram thread, but Thursday, probably late morning or something, I'll open a Zoom call, and anybody who has any questions that we weren't able to get to today, either bring them or, text me or something, and we can just do our best to try to field all the things that come up. Okay, hopefully that all made sense. Are there any, let's see, just trying to figure out if we should try to do any more reading. Oh, there's just so much good stuff left. I'm going to open the floor. What do y'all think? What do people want to do? Are there comments that are burning for anybody?
I just had a quick
Questions?
had a really quick share that I think would weave the crystal stuff with some of the other stuff that we were talking about. Just really quickly, so last year for my birthday, my friends, they got me this giant Lemurian quartz because through ceremony, I found out that I could have potentially come from Lemuria. So I went to the ceremony and this massive Lemurian quartz was so charged, and the Lemurians were telling me to stop playing small and to really step into the work. And then the next day I had a constellation where I was participating in, and I ended up representing Lemurians in that constellation. And the client, she was so upset with me for no reason. I had just met her and she was just like, I know you and I hate you, and why did you do this to me? And I was so confused. I was like, what is going on? It's 8 in the morning, I'm half asleep. I was in a ceremony last night. I just met you, lady, so I don't understand why you're so upset. So I ended up leaving the call because I was really activated from it, and I just ended up leaving it. But then I found out later that that constellation, they went into a past life where they found out that she was from Lemuria, and the Lemurians had sent her to Earth, but before she was able to root herself in the pod, Lemuria had exploded. And she was still upset about that. Like the memory of that was still in her field. And I was representing that. And it was just wild. So I just wanted to share that because I think like it just like connects what we're talking about, the field. Because like what are the chances that I was, gonna show up the next day and, that would happen. But yeah, I just wanted to connect like the morphic field and the crystal talk that we were just having and how like intelligent the universe is. It's just like we're just humans, right? And everything is just conspiring to get us all somehow linked. I don't know how to put it, but I wanted to share that with you guys because where else would I share that story? But yeah, I hope it's helpful for anyone that's listening to me.
Thanks, Steph.
Maybe we
one
could
of the
read like another oh, never mind.
Go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was gonna say maybe if we have time, maybe we could read like another paragraph. But if someone has something else to say, then never mind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I want to add a plug in for. I would love to have a little more time for reading in the study as well. Like, yeah, there's a lot of juice in the stories, but then to come to the end of the study group and we haven't gotten to very much of the material, I would like to prioritize that more in future.
Great, thanks for saying that, BJ. Let's read one more. Let's end on a reading note. We may not be able to discuss it, but let's do 2.4. Would anybody volunteer to read that?
I can. Okay. Can you all hear me? Okay. Questioner. Yes, you mentioned that the pyramids were an outgrowth of this. Could you expand a little bit on, were you responsible for the building of the pyramid, and what was the purpose of the pyramid? I am wrong. The larger pyramids were built by our ability using the forces of one. The stones are alive. It has not been so understood by the mind, body, spirit distortions of your culture. The purposes of the pyramids were two. Firstly, to have a properly oriented place of initiation for those who wish to become purified or initiated channels for the law of one. Two, we wish then to carefully guide the initiates in developing a healing of the people whom they sought to aid and the planet itself. Pyramid after pyramid charged by the crystal and initiate were designed to balance the incoming energy of the one creation with the many and multiple distortions of the planetary mind, body, spirit. In this effort, we were able to continue work that brothers within the Confederation had effected through building of other crystal-bearing structures, and thus complete a ring, if you will, of these about the Earth's, as this instrument would have us vibrated it, surface. This instrument begins to lose energy. We ask for one more query or subject, and then we shall take our leave for this time space. Questioner. You might mention there was originally a capstone on the pyramid at the top. What was it made of and how you moved the heavy blocks to build the pyramid? What technique was used for that? I am wrong. I request that we be asked this question in our next work time, as you would term the distortion sharing that our energies produce. If you have any questions about the proper use of this mind, body, spirit, we would appreciate you asking them now. Questioner. Consider them asked. I mean, I don't have anything to go on. What is the proper use of this instrument? What should we do to maximize her ability to comfort, rejuvenation, etc.? I am wrong. We are pleased that you asked this question, for it is not our understanding that we have the right duty to share our perceptions on any subject but philosophy without direct question. However, this mind, body, spirit is not being correctly used, and therefore is experiencing unnecessary distortions of body in the area of fatigue. The vibrations may well be purified by a simple turning to the circle of one and the verbal vibration while doing so of the following dialogue. Question, what is the law? Answer, the law is one. Question, why are we here? Answer, we seek the law of one. Question, why do we seek Ra? Answer, Ra is an humble messenger of the law of one. Both together, rejoice then and purify this place in the law of one. Let no thought form enter the circle. We have walked about this instrument, for the law is one. The instrument at this time should be in trance. The proper alignment is the head pointed 20 degrees north by northeast. This is the direction from which the newer or new age distortions of love light, which are less distorted, are emanating from, and this instrument will find comfort therein. This is a sensitive instrument, by which we mean the distortions which enter her mind-body-spirit complex come from any of her senses. Thus, it is well to do the following. Place at the entity's head a virgin chalice of water. To the center, the book must be closely aligned with the instrument's mental distortions, which are allied most closely with the law of one, that being the Bible that she touches most frequently. To the other side of the Bible, a small amount of scents or incense in a virgin censer. So the rear of the book symbolizing one, open to the Gospel of John, chapter 1, a white candle. The instrument would be strengthened by the wearing of a white robe. The instrument shall be covered and prone, the eyes covered. We feel that though this is a complex of activity circumstance and may seem very distorted from a purposeful teach learning experience, these elaborations on the technique of trance will ease the mind distortions of those about the instrument as they perceive improvement in the instrument's distortions with regard to fatigue. We add only that if these teach learning sessions are held during time-space during which your sun body does not light your room, that it is best to call the instrument before the lighting of the illuminary mechanism. I am Ra. I leave you in the glory and the peace of the one Creator. Rejoice in the love light and go forth in the power of the one Creator. In joy we leave you, Adonai.
Bam, you did it. You just closed us out. Thanks for reading all of that. I appreciate that, Kristen.
Mm-hmm.
And I am sad that we won't be able to discuss all that right now, but hopefully we can either find other contexts for that or pick it up next time. So thank you all for your attention and your contributions and your presence. And our time is complete.
And I just wanted to apologize. I think I don't have as good a concept of time as I should have. I didn't need to go into how I was misdiagnosed, which took time. I just, I had mentioned that I was down under the ocean in my near-death experience, and I wanted to share that near-death experience was on purpose. Yeah. If I hadn't been near death, I wouldn't have been going down under the ocean to do whatever. But I took too much time, and there's such juicy stuff to talk about. And I just wanted to say I'm sorry.
No apologies necessary. We are all learning together and supporting each other in this. So doing our best.
Thank you.
Song, can I say something to you really quick?
Yes.
I just wanted to thank you for what you shared. I've actually it's kind of been on the back of my mind. Hi. Hi. Specifically the meditation that you shared that you had before your near-death experience, where you were everything. Victor, let me talk. No, let me talk. I used to work directly with victims of sex trafficking, and then after that, I worked with teenagers in a residential mental health facility. Some of them were coming in directly from being trafficked. And that comment that you shared about the difficulty of being aware of the oneness in those types of situations really hit me hard, because that's something that has been itching under my skin for years. Because I was working directly with it and having read the Law of One material, it's always been really, really difficult for me to reconcile those two things. And your meditation felt really confirming. And then you also made a comment that we don't have to know, it just is. And I think I needed to hear that. So every minute you took was very valuable to me, and I'm grateful for you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you all. Thank you for your love and your warmth.
Thank you.
Curiosity.
Hi. No.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone. See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Aaron, BJ, can I ask you guys a quick question?
Sure.
And this isn't related to the group, so if anyone's done, this is just related to something, but just because you're here. Can I just send an email to our group email from the retreat to telling them what you guys are offering?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
You're welcome to. I think we did send a note to everybody, but I don't know if people saw it or what. But yeah, sure. Whatever. If you're inspired to do so, that's perfectly within your.
Tell
right
anybody you want to. We're
That's right.
definitely wanting to spread the word.
Yep, that's
Okay.
right.
Thanks, Kristen.
Yes, I love you guys so much.
Love you too. Mwah.
Mwah. See you guys soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.